Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of The Penguin. It was called Inside Man, and as it starts, in a therapeutic hypnosis session-induced flashback to her time in Arkham, Sophia is visited by her brother, who is, of course, missing his finger, and she witnesses him being shot before being brought out of hypnosis, at which point she behaves violently for a moment before her therapist is able to calm her. So when he tells her she's safe, she says she's not safe, she's home. Oz visits Sal Maroni in Blackgate, and Sal reads him the riot act for framing him for killing Alberto. But Oz once again pitches his idea of teaming up with Sal to take over the drops operations in the city, and this time Sal agrees. But Oz, who for the first time in the show is called Penguin by the Falcone organization boss, ends up in one of the trucks that he plans on having Sal shoot up as part of the plan to take the shipment, instead of the follow car that he planned to be in, causing him to have to improvise in a way that itself almost gets him killed. He then has to pretend not to know what happened when Maroni's men steal all the drops. Sophia confronts the Falcone's leadership, saying that it seems very obvious that Maroni had help from the inside, after lambasting them for not having taken retribution for her brother's murder yet. Oz tries to make an alliance with Sophie so that she can help him get a hold of the shipment that Alberto wanted to use to start a new thing, but she rebuffs him harshly. Oz tells Victor how he had to learn to drive on the fly once, after being offered the role of driver for one of Carmine's bosses, who Carmine later killed when he caught him talking to the feds, before a bunch of hookers show up at Oz's place for what would seem to be a party. Sophia leans on a corrupt detective who's addicted to drops and who used to work for her father in order to induce him to help her find the inside man, supplying him both with drugs and cash to get him to play along. At Oz's party, a number of his henchmen show up as well, and Oz gives a brief speech about the heist and his plan to move up in the crime world before he's confronted by the hooker that he paid for his alibi the night that he killed Alberto, which she's now uneasy about. At her place, Sophia wakes up from an apparent nightmare after having clawed at herself on the morning of her brother's funeral. Oz gets a call and has to go visit his mother, who apparently went wandering off and was found by the landlord in a state of confusion. Oz puts some music on and tries to dance with his mother, but she can barely stand, and after they talk briefly about how she doesn't want to be cooped up in her house anymore, he goes off to the funeral, though he actually misses it. Oz talks with Sophia just after the services about how the death of his brothers affected his mother, but that she eventually pulled herself out of the depression it put her in, only to then tell Sophia she died a few years back when Sophia asked what it was that turned things around for her, which is weird because she's not dead. Anyway, the corrupt detective brings Sophia a drugged up guy who apparently has information for her about what happened with the heist. When Maroni's wife summons Oz to a meeting after the guy that the detective brought to Sophia was taken from a hospital, he fingers Sophia for it, but then he gives the wife the pictures that he had in his safe that he removed at the beginning of the first episode, showing the current leader of the Falcone family, Vidi, sleeping with someone's wife. Oz then takes Vic on a mission to plant jewels in Vidi's car before going to the memorial after gathering to try to get Maroni's guy back, while simultaneously Sophia is waiting for the guy to talk. Speculating, Oz casually drops the idea that there's a Marino henchman in the basement to Vidi, causing him to tell Luca, who confronts Sophia. Vic gets caught trying to plant the jewels. Oz finds Maroni's guy and tells him to tell Sophia that Vidi killed Alberto, but then he gets a call from Vic saying that he can't get the jewels in the car, prompting Oz to have to brutally kill Maroni's guy by gutting him instead. When Luca rounds everybody up to question them after the body is found and to look for the knife on someone's person, Oz picks a fight with Vidi and plants the knife on one of the men who breaks up the fight, after which Luca kills him, which pisses off Sophia because she wanted to do it, and when she confronts him, he basically sends her packing out of Gotham. Oz is tasked with burying the guy that he framed and Maroni's guy, and so he gets Victor to dig the grave, and then briefly makes him lay down in the grave while telling him that he'll have to learn to think on his feet and adapt to situations, unlike how he did while he was trying to plant the jewels. if he doesn't want to end up in a grave himself. Oz is then called to a meeting with Sophia in the family crypt, and she shows him the jewels that Oz ended up planting somewhere else before she tells him that she's reconsidered and will now go in with him on his seeming plan to take over the family. And that's where the episode ended. So I continue to enjoy this show. Colin Farrell is just amazing in this part. You'd swear the penguin was a real person, and just he's totally believable in the part, and it's just amazing to watch, really. So I'm really enjoying his performance. Kristen Milioti is also excellent as Sophia Falcone. She's just really, really good, and I'm enjoying her as well. That said, I didn't think this episode was quite as strong as the first episode, but it's still very good. And, I think in these first two episodes, they've set up a great story, which is here's Oz trying to rise to the top, but he's playing both ends against the middle on the fly with no real plan. His plans change from moment to moment as he adapts to the situation, like he was telling Victor. And it's very fly by the seat of your pants and very haphazard and very, in that way, as an audience member, thrilling because you're like, what in the world is going to happen next? And how in the world are you going to get out of this? And he's going to get screwed. He's playing, both sides. And it's pretty thrilling to watch. So I'm enjoying it. Also, I noticed that this show is not PG-13 like The Batman was. The film The Batman, which this Penguin show is based off of and spun off from, was PG-13. This show is not. They use the F word and there's nudity, I've noticed in the first couple episodes. And yeah, so this is decidedly R-rated, which is interesting. I noticed a couple of things too that kind of put me off a little bit. First of all, there's this gigantic heist scene in the movie involving several trucks and crashes and crazy shooting in the streets. There might even have been an explosion. I don't remember for sure, but this is exactly the kind of thing that Batman would show up to. You would see criminals making a move to relocate a drug operation, and the whole thing would start. The caravan would begin, and you would see Batman show up on the scene, especially maybe once there was a crash and some gunfire started, probably because he would have caused it, to try to stop the movement of the drugs or the gangs, out of the city or whatever. And no Batman. Batman doesn't show up to this crazy event that normally Batman would have absolutely shown up to. So, you know, I know why that is. It's not the Batman show, it's the Penguin show, but at the same time, it's like, is this believable as a show taking place in a Gotham where Batman exists and he doesn't move in on these events? So, I don't know, it struck me as a little odd. The other thing I want to know is why wasn't anybody guarding the room that Maroni's guy was in? Like they put him in a basement and tied him to a boiler or whatever, and they had him on like a lawn chair, but what if he somehow escaped? Why wasn't anybody watching the room? The only reason that the things that happen at the climax of this episode are able to happen is because nobody's watching the room. And I find that to be ridiculous. I think they absolutely would have had someone watching the room. And if not a person, definitely cameras. These facilities, that these crime families run would obviously have cameras everywhere. That's how they do things. So yeah, I didn't buy that. Not that necessarily that anyone would be watching the cameras live, but like we should have seen something about that where Oz had to disable the cameras or avoid the cameras or whatever, but they don't show that and there's no guard. It just didn't make sense to me. I didn't believe that. It was too convenient. So I don't know. I hope they tighten up that stuff. Also, why do I feel like Oz would have had Victor wear like a hoodie or a cap or maybe even a mask when he sent him to hide the jewels, to hide his face when he was going to plant the jewels in the car? Because he did end up getting seen, which of course was foreseeable. And now, won't Falcone's men recognize him when he's going around with Oz later? I mean, not only just from, hey, I saw you trying to get into this car last week and I was chasing you and now you're with Oz, but also because of cameras. Again, these crime families and they have these they have these massive or at least extravagant properties or expensive properties. And of course they're going to have cameras everywhere. And so the idea that Vic wasn't caught on camera and that they won't be reviewing the footage and that they won't like print out his picture or whatever and be looking for him and then recognize him when they see him around with Oz, he's Oz's driver, is a little bit silly. It strikes me as a plot hole of sorts, or that it could be. So how is that gonna work? How are they gonna get around that whole thing? Because he didn't wear a hat or a hoodie or anything, so I don't know. That was a little weird. But anyway, I continue to like this show. I enjoyed this episode. Again, Colin Farrell is amazing, and I'm enjoying this show. It's gotten some criticism that it's just The Sopranos with DC sprinkled into it, and I think that's true. I think it really is just like The Sopranos with DC sprinkled into it, but I'm okay with it. It's a good show, and I'm enjoying it. I think it's very Ray Donovan for my part, because Ray Donovan is a show that I watched, whereas I didn't watch The Sopranos, although I guess it really is more like The Sopranos, but it has a similar feel as well to Ray Donovan, which is a show that I really liked. So I'm enjoying it, but I'm going to get out of here for now. I'll be back next week to give a breakdown and review of the next episode. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.